Korean Mafia boss's 8-year-old daughter sat outside Black neighbor's door every night. When they finally opened it, everything changed. She sat there every single night. An 8-year-old girl, alone in a dark hallway, knees pulled to her chest, back against the door of apartment 4B. Nobody knew why. Nobody asked. Because in a building where people had learned quickly to mind their business, asking questions about the Korean man in the penthouse was the fastest way to regret being curious. But Marcus Webb had noticed. He'd noticed for 11 straight nights. And on the 12th night, he finally opened his door. What happened next would destroy everything he thought he knew about his life, his neighbors, his own heart. And it would save all three of them in ways none of them saw coming. Marcus Webb had moved to Hana Tower 2 years before any of this happened. He was 34 years old, a high school history teacher who coached track on the side, and he had chosen apartment 4B specifically because it was quiet, affordable for the neighborhood, and, most importantly, because the previous tenant had left behind a built-in bookshelf that ran the entire length of the living room wall. Marcus was that kind of man, the kind who moves somewhere because of a bookshelf. He was not the kind of man who involved himself in other people's drama, not because he was cold. Anyone who knew Marcus would tell you that he ran warm, that he was the person students came to when they didn't know who else to talk to, that he brought food to the teacher's lounge when someone was having a hard week. But Marcus had also learned. He through 34 years of being a black man in spaces that were not always designed for him, that involvement had a cost. That stepping into other people's stories could quickly become a way of losing your own. So he kept his head down. He graded papers. He ran 6 miles every Saturday morning. He called his mother every Sunday. He read. He had not expected Hana Tower to complicate this arrangement. It was a 12-story building in the Riverside district, the kind of place that had been luxury once and was now merely nice. The lobby still had its original marble floors, but the elevator was slow and the hallways smelled faintly of whoever had cooked dinner. The residents were a mix. Young professionals, a few older couples who'd been there since the building's better days, a rotating cast of short-term renters on the upper floors. People kept to themselves. The building had an unspoken social contract that suited Marcus perfectly. Then the man in the penthouse arrived. His name, Marcus would eventually learn, was Jin Ho Kwon. But in the building, nobody called him that. The super, a round-faced man named Pete, called him the gentleman upstairs. The woman in 3A called him the Korean. The couple in 6C who had lived in the building for 19 years called him Trouble. Not loudly and not to his face, but with a particular compression of the lips that said everything. Jin Ho Kwon had taken the penthouse on a 6-month lease, paying the full amount up front in cash. He was 41 years old, broad-shouldered, and with close-cropped black hair that was just beginning to gray at the temples, and a face that had been handsome once, and now looked like it had been through something that had not made it less handsome, exactly, but had made it harder. He dressed well. Always slacks. Always a collared shirt. Never casual. And he moved through the building with the kind of practiced stillness that made people instinctively lower their voices when he walked past. He had 2 men with him. They were not introduced as anything, but they were always somewhere nearby. In the lobby, in the parking garage, once standing outside the elevator on the 4th floor at 2 a.m. when Marcus had come out for a glass of water and heard them through his door. They did not look like assistants. They did not look like friends. They looked like men whose job was to stand between something valuable and whatever might threaten it. Marcus had processed all of this and filed it under not my concern. Whatever Jin Ho Kwon was, whatever he was doing in the penthouse, it was not Marcus Webb's problem. And then the girl appeared. The first time Marcus saw her, it was a Tuesday night, just after 10. He had been up late grading a stack of junior essays on the causes of the Korean War, the irony of which would only occur to him later, and he'd gone to his front door to retrieve a package he'd been expecting. He'd opened the door, looked down, and found a child sitting cross-legged in the hallway outside his apartment, a worn stuffed rabbit held in both hands, her eyes wide and dark and completely unsurprised to find a grown man staring down at her. She was small for 8. He would later learn she was 8. With her father's dark hair cut in a blunt fringe across her forehead, wearing pink pajamas with cartoon clouds on them, and socks that did not match. One was white. One was yellow. She was looking up at him with an expression that was not fear, not quite. more like the careful assessment of someone who has learned to read adults quickly and was in the process of reading him now. Marcus looked down at her. He looked up and down the empty hallway. He looked back down at her. "Hi," he said, because it was the only thing that made sense. She considered him. "Hi," she said back. Her voice was small but clear, and her English had the faint overlay of another accent that had not quite been smoothed out yet. "Are you?" Marcus began, and then stopped, because he was not entirely sure how to finish that sentence without it becoming something he wasn't ready for. "Are you okay? Are you lost? Are you supposed to be here?" All of these questions were true, and none of them felt like the right starting point. "I'm not lost," she said, as if she'd heard him thinking. "Okay," Marcus said. "I just like it here," she said. Marcus looked at the stretch of hallway she had chosen, the 10 feet of beige carpet between his door and the elevator, illuminated by a fluorescent light that buzzed faintly and had been doing so for the 4 months since he'd reported it to Pete. It was not a particularly likable stretch of hallway. "Here," he repeated. "It's quiet," she said, as if this explained everything. And then she hugged her rabbit tighter and looked away from him in a way that was clearly a dismissal. Marcus retrieved his package. He went back inside. He stood in his kitchen for a moment, looking at his door. Then he told himself it was not his business, made a cup of tea, and went back to the essays. She was gone by morning. The next night, she was back. Same spot, same crossed legs, same rabbit, different socks. Both mismatched again. One blue, one red, as if mismatched socks were a deliberate choice rather than a failure of coordination. It was 9:30 this time. Marcus had come out to take his recycling to the bin at the end of the hall. He stopped. She looked up at him. They held each other's gaze for a moment. "Still quiet?" Marcus asked. She nodded solemnly. "Okay," Marcus said. He took his recycling. He came back. She was still there. He went inside. On the third night, he started paying more attention. He noticed that she always appeared between 9 and 10 in the evening and was always gone before he woke up in the morning. He noticed that she always had the rabbit. He noticed that she always sat facing his door specifically. Not the elevator, not the stairwell door further down, not the apartment across the hall. His door. He also noticed, by the fourth night, the other thing. The sounds. Hana Tower's walls were not as thick as the building's original designers had probably intended. Over 2 years of living in 4B, Marcus had learned the rhythms of the building around him. The couple in 3A who argued on Sunday mornings about something he could never quite make out. The old man in 4A who watched television at high volume until midnight and then went silent. The woman in 4C whose cat yowled at 3 a.m. with the regularity of an alarm. He knew the building's sounds the way you know a language you've been immersed in. Not perfectly, but well enough. On the fourth night, around 10:30, he heard something new. Or rather, he became conscious of something he had been hearing without registering it. A sound from above, muffled through the ceiling, that came in bursts. It was not music. It was not a television. It was voices, raised, overlapping, and occasionally something else. Something lower and singular that he couldn't quite identify, but that made the hairs on his forearms stand up. He pressed nothing. He went to no windows. He picked up no phone. He told himself again, not my business. But he started leaving his porch light on at night. He did not examine why. If pressed, he would have said it was because the hallway light buzzed and the porch light didn't, and if someone was sitting in the hallway, the buzzing would be irritating. This was technically true. It was also not the whole truth. The whole truth was that the girl's face had stayed with him in a way he hadn't expected and couldn't entirely account for. There was something in her eyes when she sat in that hallway that he had seen before, not in children, but in older people who had been through things. A kind of watchfulness that had been earned, a stillness that wasn't peace. Marcus knew what peace looked like on a person, and this wasn't it. This was someone who had learned that stillness was a form of safety. On the 7th night, she spoke first, and he had come out for no reason, or rather, for the reason that he had found himself at his front door without entirely deciding to go there, and she was already settled in her spot, and before he could say anything, she looked up and said, "Do you know what gimbap is?" Marcus blinked. "The rice roll thing?" She appeared to consider whether this description was adequate. Yes, she said finally. The rice roll thing. My Halmoni used to make it every Sunday. She said the word Halmoni with a softness that was different from the rest of her speech, as if it belonged to a different language than the one she was using. She put pickled radish in it. My dad doesn't like pickled radish, but I do. Where's your Halmoni now? Marcus asked. Seoul, the girl said. We came here and she stayed there. She paused. I think she misses me. I'm sure she does, Marcus said. He sat down. He did this without particularly deciding to, just found himself sitting, cross-legged on the hallway carpet facing her. Which was a strange thing to do at 10 in the evening in a hallway, but it felt right in a way he didn't question. What's your name? She looked at him for a long time, not suspiciously, more like she was deciding something. Suyeon, she said. But at school they call me Sunny because they can't say it right. I'll call you Suyeon, Marcus said. Something shifted in her face. It was small, a millimeter of change around her eyes, a slight release in her shoulders, but Marcus caught it. Okay, she said quietly. I'm Marcus, he said. I know, she said. Your name is on your mailbox. Fair enough. They sat in silence for a moment. The building breathed around them, the elevator humming somewhere, the distant sound of the old man's television through the floor. Why do you sit out here? Marcus asked. He kept his voice careful, the way he kept his voice careful with students who were telling him something hard. Easy, no pressure, just asking. Suyeon pulled her rabbit tighter. It's loud upstairs, she said. Loud how? She thought about it. Like when a storm is coming, she said. It gets very quiet, and then very loud, and then quiet again. I don't like it when it's going to be loud. I can tell before it happens. So I come here. Marcus absorbed this. Does your dad know you come here? He's busy, Suyeon said. And the way she said it, not with resentment, but with the flat accuracy of a fact she had fully processed, told Marcus everything about the particular kind of loneliness this child was living in. Okay, Marcus said. He didn't push further. He sat with her for a while, both of them quiet, and then he went inside and she stayed, and at some point during the night, she went back upstairs. On the 8th night, he brought her a small container of rice crackers through the door and left them in the hallway for her. He did not open the door. He did not make a thing of it. He just set them down and went back inside. In the morning, the container was still there, but it was empty. On the 9th and 10th nights, they talked more. He learned that she had been in America for 7 months, that she had a teacher at school named Ms. Hernandez who let her stay in during recess to help organize the classroom library, which Suyeon considered a great privilege, that her favorite book was Charlotte's Web, which she had read 4 times in English and once in Korean, that she did not watch much television because her father did not like the noise of it, that she had never been to a public swimming pool, that she was afraid of dogs, but not of cats, that she slept with 3 blankets even in summer, stacked, because she liked the weight. In exchange, Marcus told her things he didn't particularly plan to tell her, that he was from Cleveland, that he had taught history for 9 years, that he could cook exactly 4 things well: jollof rice, pasta with butter and garlic, roast chicken, and banana bread, and everything else he attempted was an experiment of uncertain outcome. That his mother had named him Marcus because she'd been reading about Marcus Aurelius when she was pregnant, which meant he'd spent his whole life either living up to a Roman emperor or disappointing one. Suyeon laughed at this. It was the first time he heard her laugh. It was a startled, genuine sound, nothing performative about it, and it caught him off guard with how much he wanted to hear it again. On the 11th night, he almost didn't open his door. He had told himself, over those 11 nights, that this was a temporary arrangement, that whatever was happening upstairs would resolve, that the girl would stop coming, that he would not allow this to become something that embedded itself in his life. He had his own life. He had his own peace. He had his books and his routine and his 6-mile Saturday runs and his Sunday calls to his mother. He did not need to become the sanctuary for someone else's complicated situation, but on the 11th night, he heard something he had not heard before. It was not the raised voices which had become almost familiar. It was something smaller and sharper and worse. It was the sound of a child trying very hard not to cry. A sound every teacher knows, that specific controlled unsteadiness of someone suppressing something too big for them. It came from the hallway, through his door, and it lasted only a few seconds before it stopped. Then silence. Marcus stood in the middle of his living room for a long time. Then he opened his door. Suyeon was sitting in her usual spot, but her knees were pulled up higher than usual, and her face was turned into the rabbit, and her shoulders were doing the small, careful thing that shoulders do when someone is working very hard to stay composed. She looked up when he opened the door, and her eyes were red at the edges. Marcus did not ask if she was okay, because she was clearly not okay, and asking a child if they're okay when they're clearly not okay puts the child in the position of either lying or admitting something they might not be ready to admit. Instead, he said, "I was about to make banana bread. You want to come in and help?" Suyeon looked at him. She looked at his apartment, which from her vantage point was warm lit and smelled of whatever he had cooked for dinner. She looked back at him. "I'm not supposed to go into strangers' apartments," she said. "That's a really good rule," Marcus said seriously. "Very smart. Do you want me to stand in the hallway and you can supervise from here?" She almost smiled. Almost. "You have a lot of books," she said, looking past him. "I do." "More than a library?" "Probably not more than a library, but a good effort." She stood up. She held her rabbit in one arm and walked past him into the apartment, and Marcus stepped back to let her, and she went directly to the bookshelf and stood in front of it the way some people stand in front of a fire, just absorbing it, letting it warm something in them. They made banana bread at 10:30 on a Tuesday night. Marcus walked her through each step, measuring, explaining, letting her crack the eggs because she asked to. She was precise and careful, and she wanted to understand not just what to do, but why. Why baking soda and not baking powder? Why room temperature butter? Why you fold and not mix? She was the kind of child who asked questions until she actually understood something, not until it seemed like she understood. And Marcus, who spent his life around students who stopped asking questions the moment they had something to write down, found this almost painfully refreshing. They talked while the bread baked. Not about the crying, not about upstairs, not about anything heavy. She asked about his bookshelf. He asked about Charlotte's Web. She told him that the part that always made her cry was not the end. Everyone expected the end. But an earlier part, where Charlotte tells Wilbur that she is his friend. Because he didn't know, Suyeon explained. He didn't know someone was watching over him. He was just there, and she was just there, and she decided to care about him before he knew it was happening. She paused. "I think that's real friendship, when someone decides to care about you before you ask." Marcus looked at her across the kitchen counter. This small person with red-rimmed eyes and a stuffed rabbit and yellow and blue mismatched socks, who had come and sat outside his door for 11 nights straight and was now telling him about the nature of genuine friendship, and felt something he could not precisely name shift in his chest. "Yeah," he said. "I think you're right about that." When the bread was done and had cooled enough, he cut 2 slices. She ate hers very properly, holding it with both hands, and told him it was very good for a first collaboration. He told her it was better with her help. She did not deny this. Then she stood up and put on her rabbit and said she should go back, and Marcus walked her to the door and she stopped in the doorway and turned. "Marcus," she said. "Yeah?" She considered her next sentence for a moment. "My dad," she started, and then stopped and started again. "He's not a bad person," she said. "I need you to know that. He's not bad, he's just—" She paused, searching. "He got stuck somewhere, and he doesn't know how to get unstuck." Marcus looked at her. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said, and she went back upstairs. 2 days later, Jin Ho Kwan knocked on Marcus's door. Marcus was grating when it happened. The knock was hard, twice. The kind of knock that doesn't ask if you're home. It informs you that you're about to answer. Marcus set down his pen, stood up, and opened the door. Jin Ho Kwan was taller than Marcus had registered from a distance. He stood in the doorway in dark slacks and a white shirt with the collar open, and he looked at Marcus with an expression that was completely unreadable. Not hostile, not friendly, simply evaluating, the way someone looks at a situation they're trying to correctly categorize. You are Marcus Webb, Jinho said. His English was careful and precise, each word given its full weight. I am, Marcus said. My daughter has been visiting you. It wasn't a question, so Marcus didn't treat it like one. She has. A silence. In that silence, Marcus became aware of one of Jinho's men at the end of the hallway, not approaching, just present. Standing with his hands clasped in front of him, watching. She told you my name, Marcus said. She told me many things, Jinho said. She told me you made banana bread. She told me you have many books. She told me you call her Suyan. Something shifted almost imperceptibly in his expression on that last one. Most Americans cannot say it correctly. She says you say it correctly. I asked her to show me, Marcus said. She's a good teacher. Jinho looked at him for a long moment. What do you want from her? He said. Marcus had expected this question. He understood why it was being asked. He understood the layers of it. The father's protection, the powerful man's instinct to suspect motivation in everything, and the particular wariness that would attach itself to a Korean crime boss's daughter developing an attachment to a black neighbor. He understood all of this, and he gave the only true answer there was. Nothing, he said. She shows up. We talk. That's it. You made her banana bread. She helped make it. She cracked the eggs. Another silence. Jinho's jaw worked slightly. Then he said, She doesn't sleep. At night. She doesn't sleep well. This was not what Marcus had expected him to say, and the unexpected vulnerability of it. This man who radiated control and danger, offering an explanation that was also an admission, made Marcus look at him differently. She told me it gets loud, Marcus said carefully. I have business matters, Jinho said. The phrase was clearly doing significant work. I understand. She is not afraid of me, Jinho said, and there was something under those words that was not entirely steady. She is afraid of the situation, the tension. She is sensitive to it. She always has been, since she was very small. Marcus thought about what Suyan had said, like when a storm is coming. He thought about the child who had taught herself to read a room before the room became dangerous. He thought about the careful stillness that was not peace. She's a smart kid, Marcus said. She is my everything, Jinho said. He said it with a flatness that made it more devastating than if he had said it with feeling, as if it were simply a fact, immovable and documented. Marcus said nothing because there was nothing to say. Jinho looked at his shoes for a moment. Then he looked back up. She can visit, he said. If she wishes. I would prefer... He stopped. I would prefer that she not sit in the hallway. It is not appropriate for a child. Agreed, Marcus said. She can knock and come in any time. I'll make sure she knows that. Jinho nodded once. He started to turn. Then he stopped and turned back, and on his face was something Marcus would think about for a long time afterward. Something that looked almost like shame, but older and more complicated than shame. Like something that had been living in a person for so long it had changed shape. She told me, Jinho said, that you sit on the floor with her, in the hallway. That you don't... He paused. That you don't stand over her. It's more comfortable, Marcus said. Jinho looked at him for another moment. Then he nodded again and walked away. Back toward the elevator, and his man fell into step behind him, and Marcus watched them go and then went back inside and stood in his kitchen for a long time, looking at the empty banana bread tin. The visits changed after that. Suyan still came in the evenings, but now she knocked at his door instead of sitting in the hallway, and she came earlier, sometimes at 7, sometimes at 7:30, well before whatever happened upstairs reached the storm stage she couldn't bear. She always brought her rabbit. She always had mismatched socks. These felt like constants, like things she was not willing to compromise on. They developed a routine. She would come in and go directly to the bookshelf and stand in front of it for a while, running her finger along the spines. Again, sometimes she would pull one out and turn it over and read the back and put it back, and sometimes she would pull one out and carry it to the couch and announce that she wanted to start this one. Marcus made tea. Green tea that he had bought specifically because she had mentioned once that she preferred it, and they would sit and sometimes talk, and sometimes read in separate comfortable silences, and she would leave before 9, and go back upstairs. She asked him once if he was lonely. It came out of nowhere. They were sitting on opposite ends of the couch. Marcus with a student paper, Su-Yan with a copy of the Phantom Toll Booth that she was working through for the first time, and in the middle of a silence she looked up and said, "Are you lonely, Marcus?" He considered deflecting. He considered saying he was fine, one which would have been partially true and entirely dishonest. Instead he said, "Sometimes. Less lately." She nodded, accepting this, and looked back at her book. And then, quietly, "Me too. Less lately." And that was enough. He met some of the people upstairs gradually, through Su-Yan. Not Jin-Ho. Jin-Ho was not a gradual meeting sort of person, but she mentioned them. The two men, whose names were Dong-hyun and Cheol-soo, and who she described with the matter-of-fact acceptance of children who grow up around complicated things. Dong-hyun, she said, could do card tricks. Cheol-soo made excellent instant ramyeon. She did not explain their role, and Marcus did not ask. He started to understand, in those weeks, something about the shape of Jin-Ho Kwan's life. Not the details. He deliberately did not pursue the details, but the shape. A man who had accumulated power and lost almost everything else in the process. A man who had gotten his daughter out of something, or was in the process of getting her out, and the cost of the process was still being paid. A man who sat in a penthouse with 2 guards and conducted business in raised voices late at night, while his 8-year-old daughter took refuge in a neighbor's apartment, and read The Phantom Toll Booth and cracked eggs into banana bread batter with a black history teacher who sat on the floor with her. He also, gradually, began to understand what Jin-Ho was doing in America. He didn't pursue this either. But information found him, the way information does, when you're paying attention without intending to. Su-Yan let things slip. A mention of a meeting that her father had been anxious about. A reference to someone named Director Choi, who her father did not like. A passing comment about the documents that were important. Dong-hyun, who Marcus encountered once in the lobby, and who was more forthcoming than his employer in the unguarded way of a man who doesn't think he's being read, mentioned that they were sorting things out before they could go back properly. The building super Pete, who knew more about his tenants than he let on, mentioned once to Marcus, obliquely, that there had been an inquiry about Mr. Kwan from someone he described as a government type, not local government. Marcus held all of this carefully and said nothing to anyone, including Su-Yan. He said nothing either about what he saw one evening in the elevator. He had come back from a late staff meeting, tie loosened, jacket over his arm, and stepped into the elevator to find Jin-Ho already in it, alone. No Dong-hyun, no Cheol-soo, just the man himself, leaning against the back wall with his eyes closed and his hands loose at his sides, looking like something that had been wound very tight for a very long time and had been allowed, for 30 seconds in a moving elevator, to unwind slightly. He opened his eyes when Marcus got in. The unguarded look lasted only a fraction of a second before it was replaced by the controlled, evaluating expression that was his default. But Marcus had seen it. "Long day," Marcus said, because it was the only thing to say. "Always," Jin-Ho said. They rode in silence to the 4th floor. Marcus got out. Jin-Ho continued up. At the last second, before the elevator doors closed, Jin-Ho said, "She said you told her about Marcus Aurelius." Marcus turned. "Yeah." "She looked him up," Jin-Ho said. "She told me that he was powerful, but he spent his life worrying about whether he was good." The doors began to close. "She found this interesting," Jin-Ho said, and then the doors closed and Marcus stood in the hallway alone. He stood there for a good 20 seconds before he moved. 3 weeks after the banana bread night, Su-Yan came to the door at 6:30, which was earlier than usual. She was wearing her school uniform, navy pinafore, white shirt, and her school bag was still on her back, which meant she had come directly from school without going upstairs first. She was not visibly upset. But she was the kind of not visibly upset that was actually very upset, and Marcus had learned to read her by now. He let her in, and he did not ask. She sat on the couch and opened her bag and took out a piece of paper, a school project, a family tree exercise, and held it in her lap and looked at it. "We had to draw our family tree," she said. "Ms. Hernandez said to include everyone important." "Okay," Marcus said. "I drew my harmony," she said. And my dad. And... She stopped. My mom isn't in it. Marcus was quiet. My mom died, Suyan said. When I was 4. I don't remember her much. Just small things. She smelled like something I can't describe. She sang when she did dishes. She paused. My dad doesn't talk about her. I think it is because it is very painful for him. But I don't have anyone to ask. That's really hard, Marcus said. Ms. Hernandez asked why I left a space, Suyan said. In the tree. There's a space where a mother would be. She said I didn't have to fill it in, but she wanted to know if I wanted to talk about it. And I said no, but... She held the paper out toward him. I want to put something there. Not her name. I don't want just her name. I want to put something that's actually about her. But I don't know what. Marcus looked at the family tree. It was drawn with great care. The harmony in a box at the top left, carefully labeled with her name written in both Hangul and English. Jin-ho in the center, labeled similarly. Su-yeon at the bottom, her own name written small. And to the left of Jin-ho, exactly as she said, a space. Carefully outlined. Waiting. What are the small things you remember? Marcus asked. Tell me all of them. She thought for a long time. The smell. It was warm. Like something cooking but not food. Like summer. And she sang when she did dishes, and it was always the same song, but I only remember the melody, not the words. And she used to call me her little moon. Her voice had gotten careful and steady in the way of someone being very deliberately brave. Suyan means, in Korean it means, it's hard to translate. It's something like the light of water. Or a moonlit lake. She named me that. She paused. My dad told me that. He told me that once. Then write that, Marcus said. In that space. Not her name. Right. She named me her little moon. Suyan looked at the paper. Then she took a pencil from her bag and, very carefully, in the space she had left, wrote. She named me her little moon. She looked at it for a moment. Then she looked up. That's better, she said. Yeah, Marcus said. She stayed for 2 hours that evening. They ate reheated jollof rice because Marcus had made a batch the day before, and she declared it very good and asked him to explain what was in it. And he did. And she wrote down the ingredients in a small notebook she produced from her bag because she wanted to remember them. She was, Marcus had come to understand, a person who documented things. She had an orderly mind in a life that gave her very little order, and so she created her own, wherever she could. After dinner, she asked if she could see a picture of his mother, and he found one on his phone. His mother at Christmas, laughing at something off camera, wearing a red sweater. And Suyan looked at it for a long time. She looks kind, Suyan said. She is, Marcus said. Extremely kind. Also very loud, and she will tell you exactly what she thinks at all times. So it's a lot. I like that, Suyan said. I think I would like a loud, kind person. I'll introduce you, Marcus said without thinking, and then stopped, because that was the kind of thing you said without calculating and then calculated afterward, and it was large. It was a future implied, a connection extended. A this matters in a way I wasn't planning. Suyan looked at him with her careful, clear eyes. Okay, she said simply. He called his mother that Sunday and told her, in the circumspect way he had, not the whole story, but enough. There's a kid in my building, he said. 8 years old. Her situation is complicated. We've been spending some time together. His mother, who had not raised a son for 34 years without learning to read him, asked one question. Does she make you happy? He thought about the sound of her laugh in his kitchen, startled and real. He thought about her face when he said her name correctly. He thought about her sitting next to him on the couch, reading Charlotte's Web while he graded papers, and the particular quality of that silence. The fullness of it. Yeah, he said. She does. Then things changed in the way that things change when they have been building toward something without your seeing it. All at once, and then very fast. It was a Thursday evening just past 8. Marcus was cooking. Roast chicken, one of his reliable 4, when he heard the noise. Not the usual late-night business noise from above. This was different. This was in the building, on his floor. and it was the sound of running. And then a loud voice saying something in Korean that was clearly not a pleasant thing, and then more running, and then his door was knocked on. 3 fast, hard knocks, urgent, the kind that have fear in them. He opened the door. Suyeon was there, not in pajamas. She was in the daytime clothes she'd been wearing when she left his apartment an hour ago, which meant she had gone upstairs and this had started immediately. She was holding her rabbit in a grip that was white-knuckled. Her face was doing the thing, the careful, not crying thing, the controlled composure of a child who had practiced it too many times. "Something happened," she said. "I don't want to be upstairs." Behind her, from the direction of the stairwell came more sounds, not from the penthouse but from somewhere in between, maybe the 10th floor. And there were male voices, at least 3 of them, and one that Marcus did not recognize. "Come in," Marcus said immediately, stepping back. She came in. He shut the door. He locked it. He did this smoothly, without making a production of it, not wanting to alarm her more. Then he looked at her and said, "Are you hurt?" "No," she said. "I wasn't in the room. I was in my room." She paused. "Donghyun told me to come downstairs. He said to come to you." She paused again. "He knows about you." "Of course he did." Marcus thought about this for a half-second and then set it aside. "Okay," he said. "Are you hungry? Chicken's almost done." She looked at him. He could see the tension in her, the wanting to ask what was happening, and the trained instinct not to ask what was happening because questions in this world could be dangerous, and he could see her choosing, deliberately, to let his normalcy anchor her. "Yes," she said. "I'm hungry." "Good. Go wash your hands. You know where the bathroom is?" She went. Marcus turned back to the kitchen and picked up his wooden spoon and stirred the pan sauce with a steadiness he had to work at, because outside his door the sounds had not entirely stopped, and he was very aware that something large was happening in this building, and that he was currently the designated safe harbor for the most important person in the most powerful man on the premises' life. He had not asked for this role. He had not planned for it. He had simply opened a door. They ate dinner. Marcus kept the conversation easy. She told him more about Ms. Hernandez's class, about a book report she was working on, about a boy at school named Theo, who was annoying but also, she admitted upon reflection, sometimes funny. She ate well. She held herself together with a dignity that struck him, again, as almost unbearably impressive for an 8-year-old. It was past 10 when Jinho knocked. Not the hard, informing knock of before. This was different. This was the knock of a man who had been through something and come out the other side of it and was now at a door he was asking permission to enter. Marcus opened it. Jinho stood there alone. He was not, for the first time since Marcus had known him, impeccably put together. His shirt was rumpled, his top button undone. And there was something on his left hand. Marcus chose not to examine it closely. His face was tired in a way that went deeper than physical tiredness. He looked past Marcus to Suyeon, who was on the couch with her rabbit, looking at her father over the back of the couch. Jinho said something in Korean. Marcus didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone, the specific register of a parent checking on a child after something has frightened them, the voice that says, "I'm here, you're safe, I'm sorry," all at once. Suyeon answered in Korean. Her voice was small but steady. Jinho's shoulders dropped a fraction. He looked at Marcus. "She is all right?" "She's fine," Marcus said. "She ate dinner. She's been fine." Jinho looked at him for a long moment. His jaw moved. "Thank you," he said. And then, in a lower register, "I'm sorry." "You don't need to apologize to me," Marcus said. He stepped back. "Do you want to come in?" Jinho looked at him as if he hadn't expected the invitation. Then he stepped inside. It was the first time Jinho Kwan had been in Marcus's apartment. Marcus watched him take it in. The bookshelf first, like his daughter had. Then the kitchen, tidy after dinner. Then the framed print over the couch, which was a reproduction of an old photograph of Martin Luther King Jr. at the March on Washington, which Marcus's mother had given him when he started teaching. Jinho looked at this last one the longest. "Sit down," Marcus said. "I'll make tea." Jinho sat on the couch beside his daughter, and Suyeon leaned against him without being invited to, just tilted sideways until her shoulder was touching his arm. And something happened in Jinho's face that Marcus, in the kitchen, caught out of the corner of his eye and looked quickly away from because it was too private to witness fully. It was the face of a man who is being forgiven by the person whose forgiveness he needs most, and who knows he hasn't earned it, and who is receiving it anyway. Marcus made 3 cups of green tea. He brought them out and set one in front of Jinho and one near Su-yeon on the coffee table, and kept one for himself. Then he sat in the armchair across from them and let the silence settle. It was Jinho who broke it. "I'm leaving," he said. Not to Su-yeon, to Marcus. "The arrangement I came here to complete is finished. We can go back now." Marcus looked at him. "Back to Korea?" "Back to a version of Korea that is safe," Jinho said carefully. He paused, choosing words. "There are elements of my life that I have been in the process of separating myself from. It is complicated, and it has taken time. But it is nearly done." Marcus absorbed this. The documents Su-yeon had mentioned. The government type Pete had mentioned. The business that was conducted in raised voices in the middle of the night. The thing on Jinho's hand that Marcus had not examined. "Okay," Marcus said. "She will miss this," Jinho said, and looked at his daughter, who was listening without appearing to listen. "She will miss—" He stopped. "You." The word sat in the room. Su-yeon, without looking up from her rabbit, said, "I'll miss the books." "You can take some with you," Marcus said. She looked up. "Which ones?" "Whatever ones you want." She considered this with great seriousness. Then she got up and went to the bookshelf and began her selection with the focus of someone making consequential decisions. Jinho watched her. Then he looked at Marcus, and in his expression was something Marcus had not seen there before. Not evaluation, not wariness, not the controlled performance of a powerful man. Just a man. Just tiredness and gratitude and something that was asking a question it didn't know how to put into words. Marcus asked it for him. "How long have you been doing this alone?" Jinho looked at him sharply, then the sharpness softened. "Since her mother," he said. "That's a long time." 4 years, Jinho said. "She was 4 when Ji-yeon—" He stopped. "Su-yeon looks like her. More every year." "She told me her mother named her," Marcus said. "What it means?" Jinho nodded slowly. "Moonlit water," he said. Ji-yeon chose it before she was born. She said that whatever the child was, they would be something that reflected light, rather than generating it. That they would take the light around them and make it something beautiful. He was quiet for a moment. She did not know then that the light around our child would be complicated. Marcus thought of Su-yeon in the hallway, sitting in the buzzing fluorescent light, making it into a refuge through sheer force of her own stillness. He thought of her face when he'd called her by her real name. He thought of moonlit water, the way light doesn't generate itself but gathers and transforms what it finds. "She's doing okay," Marcus said. "She's more than okay, she's—" He paused, looking for the right word. "She's remarkable." Jinho looked at his daughter, who was now carefully extracting the phantom toll booth from between 2 larger books. "I know," he said quietly. "She is the one thing I have done right." "She needs you to talk to her," Marcus said. He said it carefully and directly, because Jinho was a man who responded to directness. "About her mother, about what she can ask. She has questions she's not letting herself ask because she's protecting you." Jinho went still. "She's 8," Marcus said. "She should not be the one doing the protecting." The silence stretched. Su-yeon came back to the couch with the phantom toll booth, and also, Marcus noticed, the copy of Charlotte's Web, which she did not already own because she'd been reading his. She sat back down next to her father and leaned against him again, and this time Jinho shifted slightly and put his arm around her, and she tucked against his side in a way that was so natural it was clearly something she'd done 1,000 times and missed the doing of. "Appa," Su-yeon said, using a word Marcus didn't know, but understood from her tone. The particular intimacy of a child name for a parent. Jinho said. "Marcus makes good banana bread." "You have told me. You should have some before we leave." Jinho looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at Jinho. A beat passed between them that had the shape of something that had been building for a while and had finally arrived. "I'd be glad to make some," Marcus said. They stayed until past midnight. The three of them in the apartment that had been, for a few months, a refuge for a little girl with a stuffed rabbit and mismatched socks. They talked and were sometimes quiet. Jin-ho, and who had spent months being entirely controlled and opaque, allowed himself to be, in increments, something else. He talked about Seoul, not the world he was leaving, but the city he loved, the parts of it that were his in a private way. His mother's neighborhood, a particular restaurant in Insadong, the way the Han River looked in winter. He talked about his daughter's early years with a restraint that kept cracking open, little revelations escaping through the cracks. Her first steps? A phrase she'd said when she was 2 that made no sense but that both he and Ji-yeon had repeated to each other for months afterward. The way she slept, always with her hands over her head, open, like someone falling freely. Soo-yeon, for her part, fell asleep on the couch with her head on her father's arm and her books clasped to her chest. Somewhere around 11, and Jin-ho sat very still after that, not wanting to wake her, and Marcus got a blanket from the linen closet and draped it over her, and Jin-ho watched this with the expression of a man who is being reminded of something he had forgotten. "She told me," Jin-ho said very quietly, "that you sit on the floor with her. In the hallway." "Yeah," Marcus said. "I have not." Jin-ho paused. "In my world, you do not sit on the floor with people. It is... position matters. Posture matters. How you carry yourself is power." "In my world too," Marcus said. "But kids aren't impressed by posture." "No," Jin-ho agreed. "She is not impressed by very many things." He paused. "She is impressed by your bookshelf." "I know," Marcus said. "It's a good bookshelf." Jin-ho almost smiled. It was the most unguarded expression Marcus had seen on his face, and it changed him, made him look less like the gravity and weight of himself, and more like a person who had once been someone's child, who had once had a face that knew how to be easy. "I was not kind to you when we met," Jin-ho said. "You were protective of your daughter," Marcus said. "That's not unkindness." "I was suspicious," Jin-ho said. "I am..." He stopped. "I have operated in a world where people's kindness is almost always strategic, where something offered always has a price. It is..." Another pause. "It is difficult to adjust." "I understand that," Marcus said. "I don't think you could entirely," Jin-ho said, "but without offense? It was just accurate, and they both knew it." "No," Marcus agreed. "Not entirely. But the part about learning to be suspicious of everything, that part I have some acquaintance with." Jin-ho looked at him. A long, assessing look that was different from the earlier assessments. Less guarded, more genuine. "You are not what I expected," he said. "What did you expect?" Jin-ho thought about it. "Someone with an agenda," he said. "Or someone afraid. Usually it is one or the other." "What am I?" Jin-ho looked at his sleeping daughter and at the blanket Marcus had put over her, and at the apartment with its wall of books, and its print of the march, and its banana bread tin on the counter. "Someone who opened a door," he said. They sat for a while longer. Marcus told Jin-ho about teaching, about the particular satisfaction and frustration of it, about the students who broke your heart and the ones who restored something. He talked about Cleveland, about his mother, about the way some places live in you differently than others. Jin-ho listened in a way that suggested he was not accustomed to listening to people who were not telling him things he needed for business purposes, and found it, cautiously, worthwhile. Around 1 in the morning, Jin-ho woke Soo-yeon gently. She surfaced slowly, blinking, holding her books, looked around and remembered where she was. She looked at Marcus. "We made banana bread," she said, still half asleep. "We did," Marcus said. "A while ago. You're remembering right." "I want to make it again before we leave," she said, and looked at her father, and the question was also a request, was also, quietly, a hope. "We have 2 weeks," Jin-ho said. And she looked at Marcus. "We'll make it again," Marcus said. She nodded, still blinking. Then she stood up with her rabbit and her books and took her father's hand, which was something Marcus had not seen her do before. And Jin-ho's hand closed around hers with a carefulness that was also a kind of confession, of everything he'd gotten wrong and everything he was trying to be instead. At the door, Jin-ho turned once more. Web, he said. Yeah. When when the situation in Korea is. He stopped. Found a different approach. Suyeon has asked if she can write to you, he said. Letters. She is specific that she means actual letters, not email. She says it is more real. Marcus's chest did the thing again. The shift, the warmth, the ache of it. Tell her yes, he said, and tell her to keep the socks mismatched. I want to know which colors. Jinho looked at him. Then he said, with the careful weight of a man who says very few things he doesn't mean, thank you for what you gave her. I cannot. He stopped. There is no adequate currency for this. She gave me things too, Marcus said. Tell her that. Jinho nodded. Then they were gone, the elevator carrying them up, and Marcus stood in the doorway of his apartment in the quiet of the building at 1 a.m. and thought about doors, about which ones you choose to open and what finds you on the other side. The next 2 weeks were full. Suyeon came every evening. They made banana bread again. She was more confident this time, directing him on technique, while informing him that the mashing of the bananas was better done with a fork than a masher, and that she had researched this, and she was correct. They worked through the last 100 pages of Charlotte's Web together, her reading aloud and stopping to ask about words she didn't know, Marcus explaining them. When they reached the end, when Charlotte dies, when Wilbur is left, when the new spiders come and carry pieces of her forward, Suyeon sat very quietly for a long time with the closed book in her lap. She decided to care about him before he asked, Suyeon said finally, echoing what she'd told him the first time, months ago, in the hallway. Yeah, Marcus said. And he kept going, she said. After. He kept going because of her. Right. That's what it does, she said. When someone decides to care about you, it makes you able to keep going. Even after. Marcus looked at her. Yeah, he said. That's exactly what it does. She went to her father. They talked. Marcus didn't know the details, but Suyeon came one evening with a lighter something about her, a slightly different set to her shoulders, and said, My dad told me about my mom. She didn't elaborate, and Marcus didn't ask, but she sat down and opened a new book with the ease of someone who has put something down that they've been carrying a long time. On the last evening, 2 days before they were to leave, all 3 of them were in Marcus's apartment. This had happened a handful of times in those final weeks. Jinho appearing not because he had business to conduct, but because Suyeon had asked him to come, and Jinho being unable, it turned out, to refuse her most things. He sat in the armchair with a cup of tea that Marcus had learned he took without sugar, and Suyeon was cross-legged on the floor between them sorting through Marcus's bookshelf for a 3rd time, and it felt like something that might have been, under other circumstances, unremarkable. Just 3 people in a room, comfortable with each other's presence. Jinho asked Marcus out of nowhere, Do you read in Korean? No, Marcus said. But I've been thinking about learning. Jinho looked at him. Learning Korean. Your daughter is a good teacher, Marcus said. She's already taught me about 20 words. She's very patient with pronunciation. Suyeon looked up from the bookshelf. He mispronounces 감사합니다 every single time, she said. He says the second syllable too hard. I'm working on it, Marcus said. You need to work harder, she said, and returned to the bookshelf with the air of someone who has delivered a fair assessment. Jinho made a sound. It took Marcus a moment to identify it because he hadn't heard it before. It was a laugh. Short, quiet, real. Jinho Kwan, laughing in someone's living room. Suyeon looked up at her father with a look that Marcus would carry with him for a very long time, a look of such complete and transparent joy at the simple fact of her father laughing, as if it were a rare and wonderful thing she had been hoping to see and had finally gotten, and it was exactly as good as she'd imagined. On the last morning, Marcus found an envelope slipped under his door. Inside was a card with a Korean ink painting on the front, a night scene, a lake, moonlight on water, and inside the card, in careful, I formed letters that were unmistakably Suyeon's. Dear Marcus, I am going to miss your bookshelf and your banana bread and sitting on the floor with you. I am going to miss that you say my name right. I have decided that you are like Charlotte. You decided to care about me before I asked. I think my dad is learning how to be less stuck. I will send you letters about my socks. Please do not let anyone else sit in your hallway. That was mine. Love, Soo-yeon. P.S. The yellow and blue socks were actually a mistake the first time, but then I started doing it on purpose. Under the card was a folded piece of heavier paper. Marcus unfolded it. It was a note, in a different hand, Jin-ho's, precise and controlled like its writer. Webb. I am a man who has rarely encountered something without strategic value. So you have reminded me that this is a profound impoverishment. My daughter will write. I would consider it appropriate if you also wrote back. Not just to her. There was nothing else. But there didn't need to be. Marcus read both notes twice, folded them back, and put them carefully in the drawer of his desk where he kept the things that mattered. He went to the hallway and stood at the spot, the 10 feet of beige carpet between his door and the elevator, and looked at it. The fluorescent light had been fixed at some point. Pete had finally gotten to it. It no longer buzzed. He stood there for a while, in the quiet hallway, thinking about doors, about a little girl who had sat outside one for 11 nights before it opened, about what had walked in when it did, about a father who had spent years getting stuck and was, by inches and by grace, and by his daughter's stubborn love, getting unstuck. About a history teacher from Cleveland who had lived in this building for 2 years and had been perfectly, quietly, efficiently lonely without quite knowing it, and who had then sat on a hallway floor with a child with mismatched socks and found his way back to something. He thought about what Soo-yeon had said about Charlotte, about deciding to care about someone before they ask, about how the spider had watched over the pig from above, had seen what he needed, had done the work not because Wilbur asked, but because she had decided he mattered. And he thought about the ways that caring changes you, not just the person you care for, but you, the carer. How it fills a space you hadn't noticed was empty. How it makes you able to keep going, even after. He went back inside. He sat at his desk. He took out a piece of paper. Actual paper? Because she was right. It was more real. And he began to write. Dear Soo-yeon, you were right about the second syllable. I'm working on it. The hallway is very boring without you. I've already started learning the alphabet because I want to be able to read the books you'll send in Korean someday. Yellow and blue is a very good combination, intentional or not. I think intentional is better though. It means you decided. Tell me about Seoul when you get there. Tell me which things are like what you imagined and which things are different. Tell me what your grandmother's house smells like. Tell me about the gimbap with the pickled radish. I'll tell you about here, about the hallway without the buzzing light, about the bookshelf which has some gaps where you took things, and I like the gaps because they're yours. I'm glad you knocked on my door. Or that you sat outside it until I opened it. Which is also a kind of knocking, when you think about it. Moonlit Water is a very good name. Your mother was right about what you would be. Love, Marcus. He folded the letter, addressed the envelope to the address Soo-yeon had left him in Seoul, and set it on his desk. Then he sat for a moment, and then he took out another piece of paper and began a second letter. This one was harder to start because he was less practiced at it. At writing to men like Jin-ho Kwon, at finding language that would be received correctly, that would not be mistaken for pity or strategy or anything other than what it was. He thought about it for a moment, chewing on the end of his pen, and then he wrote, Kwon, you asked what I wanted from her. Nothing was the right answer, but not the whole answer. The whole answer is that I didn't know I needed what she gave me either, until she was giving it. That seems to be how it works. The giving and receiving gets confused, and in the end, it's the same thing. I think you're further along than you think. If you find yourself in America again, you know which door to knock on. You don't have to wait outside it. Marcus Webb. He sealed that one too. Addressed it. Set it next to the first. Then he stood up, went to the kitchen, took down the banana bread tin, and started pulling out ingredients. He did this without a particular plan, just the impulse to make something, to fill the apartment with the smell of something warm, and to do the concrete and unglamorous and genuinely good work of making a thing that nourishes. Outside his window, the city moved. Somewhere above him, a penthouse was being vacated, boxes being loaded, a life being packed up and carried towards something new and less complicated. Somewhere in an airport or already on a plane, an 8-year-old girl was holding a stuffed rabbit and 2 borrowed books, and the knowledge that someone across the world had sat on a hallway floor with her and called her by her real name and thought she was remarkable, and this knowledge was a kind of compass, a fixed point she could orient herself by in the years ahead. And in apartment 4B, a history teacher mashed bananas with a fork. She was right about the fork. She was always right about things she had researched, and put them in a bowl, and felt, while in the ordinary warmth of his kitchen, in the quiet that was now a different kind of quiet, the full and sufficient weight of a life that had been enlarged by something he hadn't planned for, hadn't calculated, hadn't strategically pursued. He had opened a door. That was all. He had opened a door, and a little girl with mismatched socks had walked in with her rabbit and her questions and her brilliant, watching eyes, and everything had changed. Not dramatically, not with violence or revelation, but the way real change happens. Slowly, through small acts of care, through sitting on floors and saying names right and making banana bread at 10:30 on Tuesday nights. Through deciding to care about someone before they ask. Through leaving the porch light on. The bread went in the oven. Marcus cleaned up the counter, set the timer, and went to his bookshelf. He ran his finger along the spines, past the gaps where Charlotte's Web and the Phantom Toll Booth had been, and stopped at a book he hadn't read in years. A collection of Korean poetry that he'd bought in a used bookstore once without ever getting around to. He pulled it out. He sat on the couch with it. He opened it to the first page. The first line was something that had been translated as, "Even water carries the moon without knowing it has done so." He read it twice. Then he set the book on his knee and sat with the warmth of the oven and the smell of baking and the particular silence of a room that had recently held people who matter, and he let the words do what words do when they're exactly right. Settle into you, find the place that was waiting for them, and stay. Outside apartment 4B, the hallway was empty and quiet. The light was fixed now. It didn't buzz anymore. But if you stood there long enough, in the particular way that some places hold the shape of what has happened in them, you could feel the outline of something. A small person, cross-legged, a stuffed rabbit in her arms, choosing a patch of carpet outside a closed door and making it, for a while, the safest place in her world. She had been right. It was hers. And it always would be.